Welcome to the On the Edge podcast with your host, Scott Groves. All right, ladies and gentlemen, it's Scott Groves with the On the Edge podcast. I'm here with my new friend, Keith Ferrazzi, which is funny because when I got scheduled this interview through his publisher, because he's got this new book coming out, Never Lead Alone, I was like, man, this guy sounds familiar. This guy sounds so familiar. And then I went to your Amazon. And I'm like, oh, yeah, I read your first book like 15 years ago called Never Eat Alone when I was just getting into personal development and professional coaching. Somebody had recommended your book. They're like, hey, Scott, you're a loan officer. You got to connect with realtors and financial planners. You should never have a meal alone. You should always be networking. And that's like the power of success. And so what's funny is I've been following your career for 15 years, watched some of your keynotes. You got a lot of funny stories from working at Deloitte & Touche. And I'm such a fan, but I didn't know your name because I just remembered the name of the book. And so when it all got figured out, I was like, dude, this is like a dream come true. So thank you so much for being here.
It's my pleasure. And by the way, that happens to me all the time. People are like, Keith Ferrazzi, Never Eat Alone. Oh yeah, Keith Ferrazzi. Yeah, so thank you.
Oh, it's so funny.
And by the way, your energy is extraordinarily contagious. It's
okay.
Awesome.
Well, thank you. So tell us the background, because I know like poor immigrant background, right? Like picked on in grade school and then to where you are today. Just give us the Reader's Digest version of Life of Keith.
Yeah, sure. So it starts, as you said, in southwestern Pennsylvania, Pittsburgh. Old man was an unemployed steel worker, crashed to the steel industry. But that's important because here I was, an immigrant kid. My old man was unemployed. My mom had to become a cleaning lady. I had to go work at the local country club just to make ends meet. And I swore as a kid that I would grow up someday and fix American manufacturing. That was my dream. And I thought at the time that I would get into politics. I was going to be governor of Pennsylvania, and then I was going to be president of the United States, and I was going to fix American manufacturing. And it's interesting. I didn't go that path.
Right. I wish you would have.
Well, today I wish I would have. Today I wish I would have, and I'll explain some of the reasons I didn't. But, the pivot point for me, and this was the story that was told in Never Eat Alone, was that there was a woman at the Latrobe Country Club who took me under her wing. And this woman opened doors to me that were almost as if nepotism was available to me, right? I mean, like, no fucking way. Excuse me. You
can cuss on this all the time.
No way. And I'm from Pittsburgh, boy, and I've always got to behave myself in the audiences that I hang out with. So
no, this audience is used to the swearing, so we're good.
Thank you. So, there was no way that I was going to have nepotism available to me. My dad didn't go to college. Nobody that we knew went to college. I mean, my old man, our family, all blue-collar, steel workers, ditch diggers, unemployed folks. And she opened doors to me. And years later, I asked her the question, Mrs. Poland, why did you do that for me? And she said, Keith, you took 2 strokes off my golf score. Now, this backstory of that is my dad used to tell me to get up to the golf course 2 hours early, and ended up being about a half an hour early.
Right.
And hustle. Know where the pins are placed. Know how the greens are cut. Know everything you can possibly know. Bust your ass. Never lose a ball. Put yourself in harm's way. Whatever you need to do. Look, that $20 was meaningful. I would get up there, sit all week, maybe get out once or twice for $20. Mom would work every day for $20 a day. I mean, this was meaningful money, right?
Yeah.
And so because I showed up at the golf course a half an hour early for this woman, she showed up for me. And that's the takeaway of Never Eat Alone. You lead with excessive generosity. You bust your ass to be of service. And then when you show up, by the way, you build real relationships, not this transactional, smarmy, networking, passing out business cards, but build real relationships. Mrs. Poland became like a mother to me. She took me on vacations with her family and her son, who became my best friend. She helped my parents get jobs. And she was game-changing. And it was all authentic, it was all beautiful, and it was all game-changing. So my point to your listeners from my first book is that between now and every dream that you have, there are a set of people who are going to open doors for you, that will be available to you, that will fundamentally change your life. And it is your job to build those relationships. Now, what I learned over the years, and I've had some extraordinary success, I got lucky because of doors Mrs. Poland opened for me. I got into small private elementary schools on a full scholarship. Because I did well and hustled, I ended up getting into Yale University. And
holy cow.
Yeah. Then I went to Harvard Business School. And
So like a couple of good schools, yeah.
right? And with a lot of humility. I mean, it's funny. I in one of my books, I wrote about my first year at Harvard, sitting there thinking, "Oh my God, how in the world did I get in here?" And, after about a year at Harvard, I was like, how in the world did these guys get in here? Because the lack of practicality, there was a lot of eye bankers, et cetera. And when I left Yale University, I was the only kid that went to work in manufacturing. I went down to the plant. I wanted to learn what it was like to be in manufacturing. Because remember, my commitment was to reinvent manufacturing. But at the same time, I was running for politics. I ran for city council in New Haven.
Is that like 23?
No, probably 19.
19. Oh, holy shit.
I ran for city council. It was in the New York Times. There was this guy that was a big deal at the time in the Republican Party named William F. Buckley.
Yeah.
He called me and said, I want you to come down. And I came down to his home in Connecticut, and I brought a friend of mine named Fareed Zakaria, who is on, if you ever watch television.
Yeah, William Buckley was the editor of National Review, right?
Review.
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
So I was hanging out with all of these. I was hanging out with all of these bigwigs. Fareed was an incredibly brilliant guy, and again, his show is extraordinary. And I was on my way. I was going to be. I had funding in Pennsylvania to win a congressional seat. I was going to be governor. I was going to be president. Everything was like on track. And I don't know why we went on this tangent, but that's okay. I'll finish it. And all of a sudden, I realized something. Fuck, I'm gay. And I'm like, shit, this is not going to be the path for Republican presidency.
What year is this, by the way?
So I was just out of Yale. I was probably in 1988.
Yeah. So other than the log cabin Republicans, which were kind of underground, there was not a lot of.
There was no Will and Grace.
Yeah.
There was no Barney Frank.
Yeah.
Liberace was straight. So, it's like this stuff wasn't going to fly. And so I was like, okay, well, I can either lie for the rest of my life and hide it, or I can pivot, which I think we all need to learn. And agility in my new book there's a chapter on agility. Agility is how we have to live our life. Agility is the operating system of everything we do. We're living in a world of radical transformation, and we need to be radically adaptable. So in this case, I pivoted. I pivoted hard, and I went to business school. And I realized I wasn't going to lose my mission, though. I was still going to be responsible for reinventing American manufacturing.
Was there any concern at that time? Because, by the way, my family also from Pittsburgh, from Highland Park area.
Oh, nice.
My middle name is Lambert because my dad is the biggest Pittsburgh Steelers fan ever. So Jack Lambert, shout out. Yeah, it's the days
in the 70s.
But my Uncle Augie, who lives here, same thing. In the 80s, he and his partner were like, Pittsburgh's not really the place to be if you're gay. So they moved to Vegas. And was there any concern even going into the business world?
What the hell else was I going to do? I mean, I wasn't, at least in the business world, I could be private.
Right.
And I didn't, if you're in politics, they're going to dig up everything.
Right.
And it's actually funny. I was working this is now way off track. But
it's fine. This is what we love.
I was working for Deloitte at the time, which is one of the strongest diversity, equity, inclusion companies in the world today. It's an extraordinary firm. But back in those days, it was like every other company, and it wasn't.
Yeah.
And I was working for the CEO of the firm, of Deloitte, because I was the chief marketing officer. That's its own story, how I got there before the age of 30, which is why I actually ended up writing the book, because of how I leveraged success through relationships to achieve extraordinary outcomes in my career. And I was sitting at dinner one night with Pat, and Pat says, so what's your dream? And I said, well, I want to be partner of the firm, and I'd love to be chief marketing officer of the firm. And he said, that's amazing. I think we can get you on that path. And in the same dinner, but totally unbeknownst to him, he didn't put them together, I said, what would you do if we found out that there was a person going to become partner and he was gay? He's like, that's easy. We'd figure out a reason not to make him a partner.
Oh, my God.
Right? And then, of course, he took me out like a father and to a titty bar.
The good old days.
The good old days of this
business,
90s. But so that was those days, right?
Right.
And, interestingly enough, spent ahead, and I became partner. I was the youngest partner ever elected at the time.
You have to, because I've heard this story before. You have to tell the story of how you became the youngest partner at Deloitte & Touche, which for people that don't know, this is big boy consulting. This is like IBM wants to acquire $1 billion company and they go to you guys for the consulting, that kind of stuff, right? Like this is the big leagues of Wall Street.
Well, back in the day in the 90s, we were the lowest of what was called the Big 8 consultancies.
So this is like Bain.
So you got Bain, BCG, McKinsey, Accenture, Ernst Young, all of those. We were at the lowest of the pack. Right?
Okay.
And the CEO, Pat, was on stage in front of 2,000 interns. I was nothing. I was just an intern, summer intern from business school sitting in the room. And he was going on about wanting someday to be at par with McKinsey and Accenture, which it then was called Anderson. And I'm sitting there thinking, I'm like, first of all, that's not going to happen. We're at the lowest of the Big 8. And I see how we're behaving. We are not, my instinct was, we're not behaving like the big boys. And so I called right then a professor of mine at Harvard, and I said, hey, I'd like to do an independent study, and I would like to do a research project on what is the best world-class professional services marketing. What does that look like? And he said, that's great, let's do it. And so I called the CMO, Chief Marketing Officer of McKinsey, a guy named Bill Mattisoni. I called the Chief Marketing Officer of Accenture, a guy named Jim Murphy. And I said, hey, I am a kid at Harvard, and I'm really curious about professional services marketing. From what I can tell, there's been nothing written about it. I'd like to do a world-class benchmark of what does it mean to be best practice. And I said, I was working at Deloitte, which, you know, they didn't even consider a competition. And I was just thinking about this. And they said, it's great. So I went around and I interviewed 10 heads of marketing from the biggest, most prominent firms. And I wrote a white paper up on what did I learn from each. Thought leadership from McKinsey and how do you adopt marketing practices that are more consumer-oriented for Accenture and all these different things. And I gave it back to all of them. But then I sent it in mail, that's all we had, to the CEO of Deloitte. He'd never met me. And I get a call a week later. Hey, this is Pat LeConto. I would love for you to come down to New York. I read your white paper. He said, I'll just shoot to the chase. No partner in our firm or history has ever done a more thorough analysis of how we can get ahead. And I'd love to sit down and talk to you.
Hey there, Scott Groves with a quick interruption to the podcast. Sorry about that, but I just want to take a quick minute to announce our sponsors here for the podcast, and that sponsor is me, Scott Groves. It's actually the revenue that we generate through doing mortgages here at Neo Home Loans and the money that we generate from the coaching program that I run, Consolidated Coaching for Loan Officers, coaching by loan officers for loan officers that helps support this podcast. I really started this in 2021 as a passion project during COVID, and we're excited to bring you a new episode every week, but this only happens if I'm making money in my real full-time job. So please, if you or somebody you know is looking to buy, sell, or refinance a house, our team is licensed in almost every state in the country. And if you know a loan officer who's looking for sales coaching, personal development coaching, lead generation coaching, please, please, please get in touch with us. Scott at the Scott Groves team. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love for you to support our other endeavors, which is mortgage financing and loan officer coaching, which allows this podcast to exist. Now back to your regularly scheduled programming. So you did something that these VPs who are presumably making millions in the 90s, which is big, big boy money, none of them thought to even do like a survey of what the competition was doing?
You know, I'm sure they all had opinions, but the way I put it together methodically, the way I presented it to them, the fact that I was in my early 20s, what I did, in going back to the original story, I showed up at the golf course a half an hour early for this guy, right? That's the lesson. You show up at the golf course a half an hour early for everybody that matters to you. And here I was, a kid, and he brings me down and we have a conversation, and I decide to join the firm. And he, after about a year, I'm not chief marketing officer, of course, I'm just in the firm. And after about a year, he said, we're going to hire a chief marketing officer.
But you have to be the only intern or new guy who the CEO knows, right?
Absolutely.
Like you're the only year one who the CEO has any clue is.
Absolutely. And, well, one of the things that I said, and I should say this to your audience, when I onboarded, I said, Pat, I'll join the firm under one condition. Actually, I asked him for more money too, but he said no. I said, I'll join the firm under one condition. For the rest of my time here, I want you to give me a dinner one-on-one every year. Because I knew, you know, look, with all good intention, he would have disappeared out of my life
For sure.
if it wasn't for me having ongoing connection points. So, I knew that this person was important to me. And it was funny because here I got sent into the firm and I was down in the bowels of Sears doing analysis and shit that I was terrible at. It's actually a very funny story. I'm down in the bowels of Sears doing analysis for some project, which is what young consultants do, right? And the partner responsible for the job only showed up once a week. And the person I was responsible for was 2 layers underneath that partner. And the partner who was responsible for all of the work had never met the CEO of Sears. I didn't know all this, but I'm down in the bowels. And the guy who was the CEO of Sears at the time had been a speaker at Harvard. And I had gone up to him and introduced myself to him. And he was at the time the CEO of Saks Fifth Avenue. And because I was smart and always thinking, who are the people I need to know in the path that I plan to follow? I knew that corporate enterprises were important and I would get to know CEOs. I stayed in touch with this guy. And I remember even one time that I was a student, I went down to New York and I had coffee with the guy in New York. So here I am, coincidentally, right? 3 years later in the bowels of Sears, this guy's the CEO. So I sent him an email and I said, hey, I'm working in your company right now. Do you have time for coffee or lunch? And he's like, sure, come on up. So I go up and I'm hanging out with the CEO. Now, this was a little naive on my part. My boss, my boss's boss, my boss's boss, and the partner responsible for the project never met this guy before, and I didn't even tell them where I was. So they're looking for Keith, and somebody said, "Oh, he's up having lunch with the CEO of Sears," which they shit a brick. I almost got fired right there, right? And it was at that point in time that...
How'd you play it off? Oh, no, we're old friends. We've known each other for years.
I told him the story. And first of all, I should have even been more generous to my boss.
Right.
What I should have done is taken him.
Yeah.
Right? That would have been practicing showing up at the golf course a half of an hour early by saying
boss.
to my boss, said, hey, listen, I'm going to go up and have lunch with the CEO. Would you come on with me, right? And so that didn't happen, and I fucked it up. So I was about to be fired. And for whatever reason, Pat heard, because I think somebody knew that I had this relationship with Pat, and he onboarded me. So Pat heard, and he saved my ass. He called me and he said, I want you to come to New York, because at the time I was working in Chicago. He said, I want you to come to New York, and I want you to work on a special project around what is the future of marketing. We've done a lot of work since your white paper, and we're leveling up. We're going to hire a CMO. And I said to him, I tried it again. I said, I will come to work for you in New York under one condition. And that is that if I'm successful at working on this project, you'll make me chief marketing officer of the company. And he's like, Keith, you're about to be fired. I'm saving your ass.
You're 25. You don't know shit about shit.
Right? I'm not letting you be the CMO. A partner would have to be the CMO of the company. And I said, but you could make me partner. He said, shut up. Come on in to New York and work on this project. Well, long and the short of it is, within a year, they made me partner, youngest partner, and they made me chief marketing officer of the firm. So here I am in my late 20s, and everybody else is in their 40s, 50s, and 60s, on the executive team of the company, going around the world, responsible for acquiring the Japanese firm, responsible for integrating Europe, all of these amazing things that I did as a young man. So I left there, went to Starwood Hotels when Barry Sternlicht, who's a brilliant innovator, was buying Sheraton, Westin. We created the W Hotel chain. We created the St. Regis. We had to choose, a brand that would compete against Four Seasons. So we chose a property that we had in New York called the St. Regis. So we built this extraordinary empire, right? Starwood did, and as I said, Barry did. He's brilliant. And I was the chief marketing officer and head of sales. So finished that job and decided, but here's the thing. When I was at Deloitte, we were a band of brothers and sisters taking a hill together. We were tight. Pat became like a father to me. The fact is that he didn't know fully who I was, in terms of, at the time I had a significant other, and, he was still treating me like a son, and it was an extraordinary partnership among that group of people, men and women. And then I go over to Starwood, and it was an evisceratingly competitive group of silos.
All the corporate shit.
All the worst corporate shit. All the worst corporate shit. Now, Barry was brilliant, and he drove innovation, et cetera. But I don't know if anybody knows the story. Everybody think of Starwood as being hugely successful. but we ended up having to sell to Marriott at below industry multiples. I mean, we did not succeed building and scaling a thriving company. We had to exit, and it wasn't successful. So I looked at that, and I was like, shit, that's the story. What is it like when you have a group of people who have each other's back? The word that I create in the new book that I've got coming out, what if you are a leader able to create a group of people who are co-elevating, collaborating and pushing each other higher, going higher together, versus a group of silos, a group of fear-based individuals, people just getting the job done, et cetera. I mean, that is like night and day. So that became my mantra. And I made some money. I had also run a company for a period of time that we ended up exiting in the computer game space. Of course, and I was like,
everybody but me has a great story of like exiting something tech-wise at our age.
You know what? I've lost as much money since then.
Okay.
In tech companies that I made at that time.
Not that I want you to lose, but that makes me feel a little bit better.
No. In fact, one of my best friends, Tony Shea from Zappos, is a great dear friend of mine. I actually started the Tony Shea Award, finding other radical innovators just like Tony in my foundation. But
by the way, just reading his book, Delivering Happiness, right? I never met the guy. I didn't know him. I read a couple biographies on him. But like, just like what you could feel about his innovative spirit.
One of the most extraordinary humans.
I was personally sad when he passed. I hadn't met the guy from Adam. So sorry for your loss of that friend.
Thank you. This weekend is normally my Tony Shea celebration weekend. This is the weekend that he created this concert called Life is Beautiful. And it usually is this weekend. And so I usually bring about 60 people together here in Vegas to celebrate Tony, to go to Life is Beautiful, et cetera, which is originally why I was coming to Vegas and able to see you here today. Anyway, back to even spinning back after losing money. But the idea was I wanted to create a research institute that studied and measured the impact of teams and their success against business outcomes. And so 20 years ago, I started Ferrazzi Greenlight. And really, we are focused for 20 years on what are the practices of high-performing teams. And these lessons, these methodologies, these practices that I'm going to talk to you about and that are in Never Lead Alone, we were called upon to be the coach of the senior General Motors team coming out of bankruptcy. And we were with them through that period of time. And the chief financial officer said to me, as we were paying off the TARP money early, said, you know, Keith, these principles that you inculcated into the culture of the General Motors organization was one of the primary reasons we didn't go back into bankruptcy. Now, I was crying when he said that. My dad wasn't alive anymore, unfortunately, who was a UAW steelworker. But the power of that was I had lived my fulfilled mission. I had helped to contribute to saving American manufacturing. There were millions of people's jobs that were saved in the General Motors turnaround. And that's what I love. I love bringing this intellectual property to individuals, entrepreneurs, organizations. I mean, today there's at least, 4 of the Fortune 50 that I'm personally coaching during their transformation. There's countries around the world that are looking to us to be coached to help double their GDP. I'm working with prime ministers and parliaments and ministers and kings. And we're working with unicorns as they redefine and disrupt entire industries with exactly these principles in this book that you have here in front of you. So I'm really excited about bringing it to your audience.
So I want to ask about that on Never Lead Alone, right? Because the mortgage space is full of CEOs and companies that like boom cycles, they put their name on a football stadium, or the CEO buys a private jet and a $5 million, $50 million house, whatever. And then, the cycle goes the other way and rates get a little higher and there's margin compression and whatnot. It's like, yeah, but this is not new information. Like, economic cycles are just part of the business model, right? And so I I want to ask you maybe a weird question of the methodology of the research, because so many of the business books or self-help books out there, or sales books like the one I wrote, it's a repackaging of somebody else's intuition, of a repackaging of somebody else's, this kind of worked in my business. But like when you're talking about big boy countries, Fortune 50 companies, like you have to have a scientific methodology for how you've come to this stuff.
We do, but I also don't want to pass by too quickly your point about not having foresight to see through down cycles. So we'll come back to that.
Okay.
I want to make sure that we address that, because part of a successful team is to build foresight into its practices. So we'll come back to that. Okay. But the research methodology is this. We have over 3,000 teams that we've benchmarked. And when we benchmark a team, we're actually in the room watching the practices of the team. We're having conversations with the executives. They're filling out diagnostics. And what we're looking for is correlation between stuff they say they do that seem to be different if in a higher performing team than those stuff they do in lower performing teams. So once we observe practices that are present in high performing teams, not present in low performing teams, then we are looking for practices. A practice is shit they specifically do, something that's observable, repeatable, something that I can teach anybody to do. That becomes what we call a high return practice. When we take that practice out and we put it into a statistically significant number of other teams, and it moves the needle on those teams. 37 practices in this book of leading a team are delineated, and every one of them are metricable, that they move the needle of success on the shift that needs to happen.
So is this something as simple as like, hey, this high performance team has a 15-minute huddle every morning, and that sets the tone for the day?
As simple as that. And that
actually, simple as that.
That huddle that you're talking about is a subcomponent of the Agile chapter. So there's a chapter about shifting from meandering around in your normal business to leading what we call Agile teams. An Agile team breaks all of its work down into monthly sprints. At the end of each monthly sprint, every critical thread of work gets put out in front of everybody and stress tested. They beat the hell out of that particular thread of work, challenge it, offer innovations, and then they determine what the next sprint is. That sense of agile sprints with pivots at the interim of every one is what allows you to have foresight. You know, it's like at some point, if you were a large organization, somebody who would be beating up where we are right now would have said, don't you think we need to be preparing for a down cycle that is going to occur? Your CFO would have said that, or somebody would have said that. And the whole point is, you can't be a part of a team where everybody just drinks the Kool-Aid.
Right.
You've got to have the naysayers. You've got to have the voices of dissent. You've got to have outsiders looking in, challenging what you're doing. And what's fun is that, and this is another shift, the new technologies of collaboration today with Microsoft Teams, with Google Worksheets and Workspace, the work that's out there, you know, the WebEx stuff and Zoom, all of that stuff that's available now allows you to be very abundant in collecting people's points of view. We used to run all collaboration in small, tight groups of individuals in a room in meetings. Collaboration now happens asynchronously in documents and in systems, whether it's project management systems or collaboration software. And you can get a lot of people involved in getting insight, and you can be just smarter than any three people in a room could be. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah. So but how does the leader create that culture of like hearing from the contrarian?
Just through the practices. So there's a practice in the book in chapter 6 called 21st Century Collaboration that talks about stress testing. Stress testing is when, you know, some teams, when you're done with a project, you'll have a thing called a report out. Everyone would report out where they're going. Most people aren't paying attention. But you turn a report out into a stress test. Everybody in your team stands in front of each other and says, here's what I've done that I think is successful. Here's where I'm struggling. And here's where I'm going for the next month. And then the team beats it up. And they beat it up in a document in small conversations where it's thoughtful and it's detailed. And then they give that back to the person, not because they're trying to take the guy's legs out from underneath him, but because they're making him successful. We will not let each other fail. And that is a shift in mindset from, I'm not throwing you under the bus, I'm making sure you succeed. And the leader sets this stress testing practice up. And the book talks about how do you set it up? How do you bring it up to the team? How do you do it? And when you're done doing it, you've actually allowed yourself to what I call team out. You've allowed yourself to get radically inclusive input to a point of view or a decision that you were trying to make. Now, let me speak to some of the independent practitioners out there that may be listening to this and say, I don't have a team. You're not thinking big enough. You have a team if you want to have a team. And I don't mean you have to hire people. When the pandemic hit, there's a guy named Peter Diamandis, who's a good friend of mine. He wrote the book Abundance. He wrote a bunch of books with Tony Robbins.
Yeah,
Life
all the
Force
finance ones.
No, finance. I mean, Life Force.
Yeah.
The stuff about longevity, etc. So he's a scientist. He's a futurist. And he's brilliant. When the pandemic hit, I called him and I said, and Peter just lives across town, but with his travel schedule on speaking, my travel schedule on speaking and coaching, we don't see each other that much. And I said, Peter, let's have a weekly meeting between the two of us, and let's do a couple of things. And we're gonna do a virtual meeting because it's a pandemic. Let's do a couple of things. Let's talk about our investments. Let's see what each of us is seeing and can share with each other. Let's be each other's coaches of our teams. And as there's interesting opportunities that come up, let's bring them into the room. And then pretty quickly, we each said, let's each bring somebody smart in every week, somebody else. And based on who we're bringing, we'll change the subject around that person. All of a sudden, we started accumulating a core group. And within this core group, like I went on his board of directors for a vaccines company. He went on my board of directors for my coaching firm. We both reinvented our fundamental business model and started creating more scalable digital products. And we were coaching each other on how to do it. We were mutually hiring people and having them serve the both of us. Bottom line is, he became my closest business partner because, and I didn't pay him a cent, right? If you're sitting out there as a lender, mortgage broker, as you're sitting out there as a real estate agent, etc., who's your team? Your team is whoever you enlist, whoever you agree to co-create with, whoever you agree to go hire with. And I want to give you the rules in this new book of how this team should operate, right? And that's the focus. You don't need to pay people to be in your team. You just need to create an environment where you all are showing up at the golf course for each other. And I guarantee you, it's going to strap a booster rocket on your success.
You know, I'm smiling for a couple of reasons. I just love that idea of getting your own little mastermind going. A few of us did that during COVID. Luckily, interest rates were much lower. Some mortgage people were printing money for a couple of years, and they could afford to do all this travel and stuff. But I have a question of like reinventing the business versus sticking with what works, right? Because every day I'm advertised 50 different products that are going to change my business, right? And I call it SOS, shiny object syndrome. Yeah. And I think people that intrinsically gravitate to sales, and the mortgage and real estate space is the same. Like we don't bring in professional leaders. We just promote the most successful salespeople until they finally fail, right? The Peter principle or whatever, promote people to the level of their failure. So like for salespeople that naturally want to try everything new and they maybe have shiny object syndrome, how do you as a business owner, whether you're a small team or you own a mortgage company or you own a real estate company, how do you decide like when to pivot and try the new stuff versus like, hey, we got some shit that's working. Let's stick with that.
So I've got a young man that I just hired recently as the president of our company. And we practice our own principles. So I chase after shiny things. That's why I've lost more money than I gained in startups. You know, and I'm always going to chase after cool shit.
Yeah.
But with this stress testing process as one of the mechanisms, the other thing we do is we do a lot of candor breaks. It's another practice. In the middle of a meeting or a discussion, anybody is allowed to say, I'd like to have a candor break. And a candor break is when everybody stops the conversation and we go into groups of two. You just turn to the person next to you or go into a breakout room. And what you're saying and what you're supposed to do is say, what's not being said in this room that needs to be said right now? And so Gavin calls a lot of candor breaks on me. Like my team prior to Gavin was very much used to taking my direction, and that I could work them up and get them excited about everything I'm excited about.
Right.
Or at least they realized it wasn't worth it to push back because I was just going to keep going anyway.
Right.
And you know, and sometimes piss money down the drain on the SOS that you're talking about, shiny object syndrome. But Gavin's like, hey, let's just do a candor break, which puts a pause. People then go into conversation, and then they come back with thoughtful, intellectual analysis of what's going on, and I have to hear it. And it's very powerful because...
Is that hard as the leader for somebody to come back and be like, hey, I know we're super pumped up about this. I think this idea is bullshit. It doesn't have wings.
Of course it's hard, right? And, you know, and I would say I probably overrule them 70% of the time. But I've heard it, and now it's at my own demise, and that 30% is very important.
Yeah.
Where I actually say, you're right. You're right.
You know, I wrote something down here when you were talking about the agile teams, right? Because you can really make these repeatable, you said high return practices. I love that term.
Yeah.
What for you, with all of your education and consulting knowledge and practical knowledge, what was the biggest surprise for you on a high return practice that you're like, I would have never put that on my bingo card? And it turns out with good teams, yeah, it turns out this is a pretty high return practice.
Smart question. Well, first of all, I intuitively knew that the higher degree of candor, transparency, challenging would be better. So that has not been a surprise to me, but it is the most important. The whole chapter 3 of the book around how do you get no conflict avoidance, how do you get psychological safety so that you can have a lot of candor, what are the practices to get truth-telling on the table. Listen, the worst thing you as a leader can have is have your team feed you shit, or is what I always say, inhaling our own exhaust fumes. And that's the worst thing in the world. You need to make sure that you have a diverse set of opinions challenging you all the time to be able to then make bolder decisions faster. So that's not the surprise. The surprise was the relationship stuff. Now, you'd be like, Keith, you kind of wrote a book 20 years ago.
Yeah, you're the relationship
it's been
guy.
One of the most successful books in the history of business books. The reality is I was surprised at these levels of some of the most powerful and prominent people in the world that pausing and being a bit vulnerable with each other as a practice fundamentally changed the dynamic of the team. And we have a practice in the relationship chapter called a personal professional check-in, PPC. And we should do a PPC on a monthly basis. And the personal professional check-in is, hey, what are you struggling with these days personally and professionally? It's just simple. What are you most struggling with these days personally and professionally? Once a month, all the teammates go around and share. And that's when you hear things like, well, you know, my wife and I are having a challenge with a relationship. I just haven't been home. You know, she feels totally over-indexed with the family obligations, et cetera. Or my mom, she's in assisted living and blah, blah, blah. Or you hear about, you know, a struggle with a peer inside of the business that's really twisting you, or whatever it is. Building that kind of empathy among a group of people does a number of things. First of all, it's a permission to forgive. There's a lot of shit we do as messy humans in the process of trying to work together that could easily allow me to vilify you. It's
Right.
like, what the fuck? You're such an asshole. You know, you're doing this kind of shit on purpose. You're just not a good, you know, it's like all the stuff that goes around in our crazy human head.
Right.
When somebody frustrates us, it could turn to significant resentment. But when you start to breed a little bit of empathy, then you start to realize, oh shit, this is just another person like me. And I need to cut them a break. They're going through a tough time. Maybe I'll even try to be helpful. You know, it's like that camaraderie, purposeful camaraderie. So many businesses these days are struggling with the question of hybrid versus in office.
Yeah.
And, you know, a lot of them are struggling because they feel that they've lost the touch of connection that they used to have when they were working together. Well, there are some companies, and I talk about this in the book, like Drew Houston at Dropbox or Matt Mullenweg at WordPress, where during the pandemic, they said, I'm losing the touch. I need to find practices that will make our relationships as good as they were when we were back in the offices. And so personal professional check-in is one of those. I'll give you some data. On a scale of 0 to 5, the average relationship score measured by a diagnostic question, my team has my back, I care for my team, they care for me, 2.8 on a scale of 0 to 5, which isn't really high. But that's the average relationship score.
I feel like even if I was mad at somebody, I'd give them a 3, just like out of courtesy, right?
But you got to remember how much resentment there is inside of teams, right? So in an office, when you're working together in the office, the average score was 2.8 prior to the pandemic. During the pandemic, the score went down to 2.3. Understandable that CEOs would say, get everybody back to the office. But Drew, Matt, and these guys, they said, wait, what if we did some practices that built empathy and connection? And remember, when you were back in the office, you weren't all going around and being vulnerable. You were doing it, bumping into each other in a hallway, having a chat, whatever. It was what I call serendipity bonding.
Yeah.
That was the methodology for culture creation. We're going to implement serendipity bonding. Well, we've lost touch with each other. Let's re-implement serendipity bonding. Fuck it. What if you have purposeful bonding? What if you all go around and share as a whole team? The scores went up from a 2.8 to a 3.8 if you do the purposeful bonding exercises. Now, if the team uses what I call recontracting, the first chapter talks about how your team needs to recontract. All of us right now have a contract with our team that mostly is broken. The only 15% of teams in our research are high-performing teams. 15%. So I promise you, we can pick apart any good team and realize where there's breakdowns in those teams. Only 15% of teams are truly high-performing, to a standard that we have now benchmarked of what a truly high-performing team is. So the recognition that so few teams are high-performing, we can get teams on a track of being, on all 10 dimensions, and there's 10 shifts that a team have to make. I've talked about purposeful bonding and get them up into the 3.8s. I've talked about what we call meeting shifting, which is moving from collaboration in meetings, which is messy, to collaboration asynchronously and using tools, which is much more robust, inclusive, bold, psychologically safe, etc. I've talked about the shift from conflict avoidance to candor. There's all of these shifts that we have to go through. And I would say the biggest shift, surprise to me, was universally that the bonding component was such a hands-down winner. Such a hands-down winner. Because it ended up being the foundation. With that bonding, you could then recontract, and that's what I was saying. In the first chapter, we said all teams have to recontract to be high-performing. So there, in the book, there's a diagnostic test.
And by recontract, you mean just reset the rules of the game on how the team operates.
Thank you for that clarification.
Okay.
Exactly. So, we do a diagnostic, and we show that our candor score is 2.4 on a scale of 0 to 5, which is average, 2.4 on a scale of 0 to 5. And that is answering questions like, we challenge each other in the room when it's risky to do so. We challenge each other in the room when it's risky to do so.
I'm surprised that score is as high as it is, because I've worked at probably 10 major corporations. I would think the score would be like less than 1. Yeah, because nobody wants to speak back to the CEO. Nobody wants to tell the team leader that their idea is bullshit.
But here's the thing. There are more teams willing to share candidly with their boss than they are with each other. This is the big, and we really haven't even gotten to this, but probably the most important shift in the book. And the most important thing about high-performing teams is they stop having the leader be at the center.
By the way, you don't know this, but I normally smoke cigars during these.
Now you do snuff?
So yeah. Now I've got these little Zyn nicotine packages.
I grew up.
They're the worst.
So what do you just put it down here?
Yeah, it's not actually tobacco. It's just nicotine. So supposedly it's not supposed to cause cancer.
Why do you just have a lozenge instead of that thing?
I don't know. It just lasts longer, I guess.
Interesting.
It's the worst.
Do you chew on it, or you put it?
Just put it in your gums and just mainlining nicotine. It's probably going to give me some other weird cancer, but
gum cancer for sure. Yeah. I remember growing up at the country club.
Oh, everybody spit, right?
They all had snuff back in Pittsburgh.
All chewed.
Everybody had chewed. The snuff, they put it right in there all the time.
Oh, so
Their teeth were not pretty, by the way.
I got to tell you this funny story. LA boy, surfer kid, major metropolitan area. I moved to Fort Riley, Kansas, middle of nowhere, to be in the Army, and I'm can't get laid to save my life, right? Because it's city boy, country girls. It was a weird dynamic. So I'm at this bar. I'm finally having a good conversation with a girl. And out of nowhere, she takes out a big can of dip, puts it in her mouth. And I'm like, what the fuck is that? She's like, oh, it's dip. I'm like, yeah, no, I know what it is. Why is it in your mouth? And she's like, I grew up on a farm. This is what you do. I'm here at Kansas State learning, like, you know, livestock science. And I'm like, yeah, okay, it was great talking to you. Enjoy the beer. I'm going to go to try to find somebody else.
Was she going to like spit it into her can?
Yeah, totally. And then I'm going to make out with this girl? And now I'm such a hypocrite because I smoke cigars and expect my wife to make out with me. But anyway, funny side story.
Funny.
So
we're talking about recontracting and just basically restating the agreements among a team. And so if you're sitting in a team, and as I said, only 15% are high performing. If you're sitting in a team, there's an old contract that says, shit, I'm not going to challenge you in front of the boss because if I did, it's throwing you under the bus.
Right.
And the new contract is, dude, let's challenge each other so we sharpen our tools and we both succeed. So that is a different social contract. The big shift of this book is to level up your team. So if you're a leader, stop being the hub and spoke of everything. If you're the leader, start asking your team to hold each other accountable. Instead of the leader being the only person holding the team accountable, the team holds each other accountable. Instead of the leader being the only one that gives feedback, team gives each other feedback. Instead of the leader being the only one having to keep the energy strong, no, the team's going to celebrate each other and give each other energy. So what we have done universally across the world is we've gotten teams to step up, to own their role in leadership. That's what this book does. It's not just for the leader, it's for the team. It's for the team and the leader to have a new social contract for how they step up. What we found is that entrepreneurs who have adopted these principles, they've been able to free up 30% of their time and start new businesses and have more time with their family, et cetera. So the resilience that is built into this book and this model is extraordinary.
I had two questions along this line. One is like, do you have any data on how much corporate value this unleashes when the teams are, you know, working more proactively and they're becoming high performers? That's number one. And then if you go into a large Fortune 50 company, you know, there's 1,000 teams in 200 different departments. Is this top down, bottom up? Is it a recast of the whole company at once? Or do you start with the C level and then start to work your way down? Like, how does this work practically when you're working with these big boy companies?
Well, so I'll go backward. The way we implement this traditionally, because I've never wanted to build a very big company. I wanted to build an elite, small strike force. And as a result, we generally do implement top down, but it's extraordinarily expensive, our work. And we go in and we work with executive teams, and then that cascades down. So the executive team works in these new practices, and then each executive starts to adopt those practices for their teams. They start adopting the teams the whole way down. You know, it's interesting. We've had a very lucrative, successful run of 20 years, despite the money that I take after having made it and give it to startups that fail. I never wrote this book before. I've written 5 books.
Yeah.
And I never wrote the book about the primary work that we did because I had a scarcity mindset. I believed that this was our IP, and I was uniquely preserving it for the most powerful leaders in the world that would pay us millions of dollars to implement this intellectual property. And so I didn't give it away. I didn't want to give it away. Because I was afraid that every coach out there in the world who's an independent executive coach, we don't coach executives, we coach teams. And we go in and we work with the team to implement new practices to transform the team. And I was like, I'm about to start in it. And if I wrote this book, any individual coach out there could adopt this book and become a teamship coach.
Yeah, it takes a lot of $8 copies to make that, you know, $2 million retainer for company ABC.
Right? Exactly. You know, and so I'm like, shit, I'm not doing that. And my team kept reinforcing that. And, you know, I turned 58. And I
should have been gay. You look great for 58.
Well, it's LA, actually.
It's LA.
You know,
okay.
It's LA.
You have to stay
out.
young. You get kicked out if you look over 40, right?
Exactly. So I'm sitting here thinking, you know what? I'm going to write this book. And for the last 5 years, I have codified everything we know into the simplest format so that any team member can pick up this book and start coaching their own team. You don't even have to be the team leader. You can be a team member. And if you want the team that you're on to change, of the 37 practices, there's so many practices that a team member can institute and that helps to shift the team. Of course, if you're a team leader, you can do it. If you're the CEO, you could do it for the whole company. So it doesn't matter. I mean, with the book, and the other thing that I've done recently is I've shot a video series around the book. And I put a video series that people would read the chapter as a team, they'd watch the video, and then they'd start to implement that chapter within the team. And then you go on to the next chapter, watch the video, et cetera. And I'm giving that away for anybody who wants to pre-order the book, and particularly order it for their whole team. So this is where I've gone. And I realized it's embarrassing. Like, there's a lot of I'm a hypocrite in so many different ways. And this is
aren't
one
we
of them.
all?
You know, it's like, you know, here I am, one of my best friends wrote the book Abundance.
Yeah.
And I'm living in scarcity mindset.
Yeah.
And I was like, no, this is my legacy. You know, I think my first book was extraordinarily successful. And I could almost drop the mic and say I'm blessed. I go to Vietnam and I'm working out at a gym, and not long ago, and a little woman, a little lady, I was going to say a girl, but that would have been appropriate. She's in her 20s. But a young lady came up to me and said, "Are you Keith Ferrazzi?" And I said, "Yeah." And this is like a hole in the wall. I love hole in the wall gyms. And I found a hole in the wall gym in Vietnam. And she pulled from behind her back a Vietnamese copy of Never Eat Alone. She said, and it was like ragged, and she goes, "A Mormon gave me this when they were through my town. And this was what gave me the courage to go from my small village to come here to town, and I'm the manager of this gym." And I was like in tears, right?
Yeah. How do you not just break down crying at that moment?
It's one of the, I'm getting goosebumps. It's one of the greatest gifts in my life that I had the luck of that whole book, right? And
by the way, I've seen in some of your interviews a book you almost didn't write.
this one.
No. Never Eat Alone.
Yeah, I almost didn't write it. I fought it. I fought it like tooth and nails. I was like, I'm not writing a book about networking. I'm an executive. I'm a CEO. What am I writing a book about networking for? Anyway, yeah, that's a whole different story.
And then somebody said, "I will give you X amount of dollars," and you said, "Okay, I'll write the book."
Yeah, I'll write it for $250,000. Yeah. That's back in the day when, you know, that was a lot of money. So the point that I would make is today, I think this book that's about to release is truly my legacy.
Yeah.
This is an important book to shift. We have way over-indexed on leadership.
Really?
Under-indexed on teamship.
Explain that.
So when we focus on leadership, we help leaders be good at giving feedback. We help leaders be good at lifting people's energy, celebrating. We've totally missed the fact that there are a group of humans working underneath that leader that don't know their role in being each other's leaders, in meeting the leader, in the leadership, in stepping up, in being, it's like, we don't teach a leader how to make the team give each other feedback. We don't teach a leader how to make the team celebrate each other. In fact, just the opposite. Too often leaders allow teams to talk behind each other's back to the leader. You know, it's like somebody has a problem with their peer, they come to the leader to resolve this instead of being able to deal with it with each other. Imagine if we could unleash teamship. It is literally one of the most under-curated areas of business performance and success. It just, if we can unleash teamship in this next couple of decades, we're going to radically transform business. And by the way, we have to. The point of business today is that shit has changed so much in the world, so much volatility, so much change and transformation. We're still holding on to the same way of working that we did in Tayloristic, you know, like however many
1950s,
yeah,
1940s,
exactly.
yeah.
Before. I mean, you know, Taylorism and the Industrial Revolution was much before that. But now we're certainly running meetings the same way that we did in the 50s and 60s. So we need to fundamentally reinvent collaboration for adaptability. We need to realize that we're in a volatile world that's changing. I'll give you another one. I mean, this is my next step I'm working on right now. What happens when an AI is your teammate? That's now. And that's what I'm working on in terms of my research. Our team is working on, our research team is working on how do we integrate AI as teammates.
Yeah.
And that's in the book too. I mean, I begin to talk about how you will incorporate AI. Every one of our roles need to be, and you want to hear the shorthand of that?
Yes.
So no matter what role you're in, you need to take what you do and everybody that works for you, you need to take what they do and you need to blow it up into all of its component puzzle pieces, skills, competencies, and tasks. And when you look at the skills, competencies, and tasks of a particular role, you need to put it back together again with the things that are uniquely capable of being done by humans the best, where humans will crush it and they'll have joy doing it and it'll be extraordinary, and the stuff that AI can do that a human doesn't have to do. You re-put the role back together again. Now, the downside is when people think that they can just eviscerate roles for the sake of cost reduction. That's a bad, lazy mindset. The mindset of, oh, I got a call center rep, I'm just going to replace that with an AI bot, right? No. If you really want to create extraordinary customer experience, think about what the role of the human is in the customer experience relationship in a call center, and then imagine how they partner with an AI to reinvent that customer experience. So this is something that my Tony Hsieh Foundation, which I've mentioned, to you, Tony, one of my absolute dearest friends, he reinvented call centers. He made call centers a thriving, vibrant, fun place to work because he believed that if that was true, customer loyalty would go through the roof, and it did. And Zappos crushed it.
I mean, you can still take tours here down the street of the Zappos call center.
I know.
And I've done it once. It's like you walk in there and the energy is palpable.
Yeah.
It's not, and I've seen a lot of mortgage call centers and they are a graveyard of despair. Yeah. And you walk in there and it's like, I can't put my finger on it, but there is something different just in the energy of the room, the way people decorate their desks, the way the walls are designed. I mean, it's
100%.
It's just, it was revolutionary.
100%. So that's why I know that our Tony Hsieh Award, which rewards entrepreneurs like Tony for being radical innovators in elevating humans and elevating the work. I know that Tony would have been right on the forefront of AI, rethinking how AI can actually elevate humanity, elevate the customer experience, and start partnering differently. So a lot of that has started to be covered in the book, in the chapter I call 21st Century Collaboration.
I wanted to ask about the team because, my experience has been, if you're familiar with the DISC test or Myers-Briggs or any of those, and I don't know how much of that is actually pseudoscience and how much of it is real, but
no, it's real.
Okay.
It's real.
My experience on teams has been the person who's the high D, the high I, the driver, the innovator, the intuitive person. In a team setting, they just step all over the S's and the C's, the analyticals, the quiet, the introverted. So have you found a personality type that thrives or does better on a high-performing team versus another? Or can anybody come to the table with an idea?
No, that's the point. I would flip that. I would say what you're looking for is how to adopt practices of high-performing teams that get everything and more out of every member of your team, independent of their personality type.
How's that possible?
So,
I feel like we're so dominated by our personality type.
We're dominated by our personality type. The key is not to be dominated by the extrovert, not to be dominated by the dominant. So if you're sitting on a team and you've got a dominant in the room, most likely it's the leader.
Yeah, or the salesperson or whatever.
And those people are the average meeting of 12 people, 4 people think they're heard. Right?
That's a
not
horrible.
uncommon.
That is a horrible stat.
But not uncommon. Think about it.
Yeah, it makes total sense and it's sad.
When you move to collaborative software, when you move to what's called asynchronous collaboration, which is before the meeting comes out, everybody gives their point of view in a document, then they show up and you argue to resolve a point in the meeting. Don't start meetings with new ideas. You collaborate, and then you have a meeting to resolve, because that takes one meeting in order to land the plane. The cycle time is short. You start a conversation in a meeting, it takes multiple meetings to resolve. Right? So you start it collaboratively. It's exhaustive, the collaboration. Introverts get a chance to have their full voice. If you do meeting shifting, which is what we call this, 10 out of 12 people believe they're fully heard. So I want not the personality types to dominate a room, because you're going to miss the insights, the wisdom of the quiet.
And how valuable are those voices? Like, do you have a quantifiable, this team goes from outputting 7 widgets to 17 widgets when you start to hear from all the voices?
So In sales organizations, we do, because it's tough to measure this stuff, right?
Yeah.
So the reason I said earlier, the CFO of this automotive company said, your work is one of the reasons we didn't go back into bankruptcy. Look, CFOs know bullshit.
Right.
They're the most cynical SOBs that you possibly have on your team. If the CFO said that, it was meaningful. But could I take credit? Of course not. There's so many people and things, et cetera. Like, it's a tipping point, and I think it's a necessary tipping point, because you take these large organizations that had all the consultants in the world, and they drove themselves off a cliff anyway, right? It's the teamship, like at Starwood, that doesn't exist. You're not going to have that kind of high performance. Now I want to come back to, there's a lot of extraordinary cultures I've measured, like Amazon, extraordinary culture, and high degrees of candor, high degrees of truth-telling, high degrees of agility, high degrees of a lot of the shifts that I talk about, and look at how they crushed it, but there's still ways that they can improve too, as I'm navigating my conversations with that organization. But where were we? You were right in the middle of a question you asked me.
Oh no, I want to know about the personality type and then the measurements of
what I was saying
production.
Is, I can't take credit for shareholder value turnaround, right? I can say that we've been with organizations that had been in malaise for decades, and this work has ultimately put them into a positive inflection point. But in sales organizations, it's a little easier. So we had a financial services company that I talked about in the last book, but that's also brought into this one. And we took financial advisors, and this is why it might be relevant to your audience. We took financial advisors, we organized them into small peer-to-peer groups of 4. And they started adopting these principles of teamship in small groups of 4. So when I said to your audience, if you're an individual practitioner and you think you don't have a team, it's just because you haven't engaged one yet, right?
Right.
So now let's go get these small groups of 4, and you meet on a weekly basis, and you use stress testing of where you are. You use some of the other tools, the bonding tools that help you solidify your commitment to each other, and then the collaboration tools that help you lean on each other and push each other, and some of the foresight tools help you look around corners differently. Those groups that stayed in their teams increased net new accounts by 50%.
50%.
50%, yep. And that's something, and the company
That's
was
a massive amount of shareholder value.
Well, Andy Sieg from Merrill Lynch was the one that credentialized this in the last book, and that was amazing. This is a guy who, before he took over, at the time it was Merrill Lynch, he's now over at Citi, but they were flat for 5 years. And when he took over, it was an inflection point, and they point to a lot of this work around relational success. And it wasn't just the FAs, they did it with the leaders too. So the regional leaders were coaching each other on how to coach their teams better.
Yeah.
And get more out of their teams. So this idea of teamship is transformative, even if you don't have a bona fide team. These FAs didn't have anybody reporting to them, but we used the teamship principles.
Man, I could ask questions about this all day long, but I want to learn a little bit more about you. At this point in your career, having worked with prime ministers and companies and had a few failures on the startup side, what still lights you up, right? Like, you talk about this book being your legacy, and I can feel it when you talked about shifting to an abundance mindset of like, yeah, I should put it out there. More people should be teaching this, even if you're not making the revenue off of that. I presume that's kind of your thought process. What lights you up right now in like the second, third, or fourth stage of your career?
So, look, I mean, all I want to do for the rest of my life is be relevant. You know, I just want to be relevant, not just on the legacy of a book that was 20 years ago, which was Never Alone was 20 years ago. So this is the 20th year anniversary of Never Alone. I want my next 20 years to be this legacy, you know, and then continuing the research. And look, I want to live to 100. I think I'll live to 120. My mom is 91, and she's crushing it. She just made me buy her a new car. Nice. I wouldn't drive if I were you in Pittsburgh, but she's doing great. I think I'm definitely big into the longevity space, and
you're doing all the biohacking stuff, 900 pills
stuff.
a day or something like that.
Not quite that many. Yeah, I do. I have actually found that, because I do quarterly blood draws, and I have found that the dispreponderance of these pills, they don't move the needle for me. And so I stick with the ones that I know of. I reduced my soft plaque by 30%, which is heart disease runs in my family, some of the genetic biomarkers.
I think that's like stems from Pittsburgh.
Right?
Same here, yeah.
Right?
I think you can't get away from it.
Yeah, well, at least for being Italian. So for me, I want to be relevant. I want to be hobbling out at 80, on a stage, sitting down and having a conversation with somebody like yourself, still being relevant. So that's all I care about. And so this is why this book, putting everything out there for free and giving away what I used to charge a lot for. And also, I still pinch myself. Last night, I had a coaching session with the prime minister and the ministers of a foreign country all over the other side of the world. And I'm sitting there thinking, this is fucking cool. It's like, who'd have thought it? I mean, the kid, showing up at the golf course as a caddy a half of an hour early to be welcome and invited into those kind of environments. Amazing.
So do you have a few more minutes to dive into that topic?
Yeah, sure. Okay? What time is it?
It is 1 on 10.
Yeah,
okay.
Of course.
So I don't care what side of the political spectrum anybody is on, but like, to me, the country is broken, right? So when you start talking about consulting with countries, right? When you start talking about GDP and big things that are going to move the company at a country level, are you of the mindset like business will fix the problem and be the best source of good going forward? Do you think there's a place for this book to hopefully be adopted by the UN and Congress and whatnot? Like,
so
how can you save government? That's what I'm really asking.
So I wrote an article. When Biden first took office, and it was in Fast Company, and it was how to apply these principles to the cabinet. So let's think about this for a second. So the first thing, the cabinets aren't a team. Cabinets don't stress test each other's work.
Right.
So it's all hub and spoke to the president or the chief of staff. And the first thing we could do is we could get these brilliant minds to be a team. And so last night when I was sitting with the ministers, I had each one getting stress tested by their fellow ministers. So the poor agriculture guy, I mean, it's tough in this country. I mean, he's got some really inherent challenges against him as Secretary of Agriculture. The Secretary of Healthcare had some really shitty stuff that he was dealing with. The head of education, similarly. And I had each of them standing in front of their peers getting stress tested, and it was amazing the insights that all of these ministers had for each other. And, I had set it up with the psychological safety to say, listen, you Secretary of Health, you don't have to take anybody's advice. But I want you to hear with double barrel feedback what everybody thinks, and then you decide what you want to do with it, right?
Right.
So the one thing I can say is that in the olden days, when we were young, feedback always came with the assumption we had to do it. When we got it from our parents, they said, comb your hair. It wasn't a piece of advice.
Right.
Comb your hair.
Yeah.
You got it from your teachers, when your coaches, they're all just correcting us, and we had to do it. And our bosses, same thing. But when you open up the world of teamship, you're not each other's bosses. You're each other's coaches. And so you're giving feedback, and they don't have to take it. So the ability to shift from this mindset into a more psychological mindset of we're here, we've got each other's back, we're going to push each other higher, we're committed to a shared mission. So in this country that I'm coaching, we're committed to a shared mission of doubling GDP. But we're also committed to helping each other get there. By the way, the GDP of that country doubling is a pinky of some of the companies that I'm right. coaching. And literally a week earlier, I was working with a new president of a company this is a company in the hundreds of billions of dollars of market cap, whose president is absolutely committed to doubling the market cap in a couple of years. And so we had the top execs in a room fucking wrestling how we're going to double the market cap in 2 years. And a company like that, of course, that's not about doubling the revenue in 2 years. It's about doubling mix and getting a different earnings multiple.
Right. That's new products. That's new
different products
everything.
that will have a higher multiple than a different type of product, et cetera. But the benefit of that dialogue was that group of people were in each other's shorts. There were multiple divisions. They were up in each other's shorts because they have been working together for years and they see each other's shit. They see each other's warts. They know it, but they've never had social contract where they were each other's coaches. Now, and they were each, so some of them don't even know how to build a software business. Some of them don't know how to build a yada yada business, but their peers do.
Right.
And now we're just like, we are going to, and the point is we're going to cross the finish line together. Not one of us is going to be left behind. That's a high-performing team. Not one of us is going to be left behind. So if someone's falling behind, we stop. Stanley McChrystal taught me this. I was walking with him when he had just left the military, and as you know, that was a very challenging time for him in his life.
Yeah. Never talked to the Rolling Stones reporter.
Right. Not about your president.
Right.
But we're he was like, listen, we don't leave our soldiers behind. If the helicopter doesn't take off until everyone's on that, right? And that's the way teams should be. That's the way teams should be. We need to make sure that when we pause and we go back, we're like, okay, let's pivot. Remember I said we have to pivot? And the pivot is, I was thinking that I had all these resources to plow through in my business. No, I need to give 25% of those resources to Jane because we need to get Jane across the line, because if Jane doesn't get across the line, we're all fucked.
Yep.
So we are a cohesive group with a North Star vision of massive transformation. That's how transformation occurs. Transformation occurs through a group of people committed to the mission and committed to each other, but following the teamship principles. So yes, I do believe, and so the first piece is getting the cabinet to be a team, which doesn't happen today. Second piece is getting the cabinet, each cabinet member, to reimagine team, which includes what might have been considered hostile individuals today. You know, we all hearken back to the day, and you'll remember, how old are you?
45.
Okay. I mean, you will remember, but not as vividly as I do, you know, the Reagan era. The Ronald Reagan era, where he and Tip O'Neill, who were battling, you know, in policy, but having drinks at night.
Right.
Right. I don't know that we'll get to that again. I think, you know, if you really dial it back, I think that there was a period of time when we started creating the personal evisceration as an underpinning of politics, which is a mistake. But that doesn't mean that I can't take a foe and bring them on to a team with a shared vision. So, look, I'm playing because there was a similar situation that was happening in this country that I was coaching around. But anyway, so that's a bit of a digression. But if I'm a secretary and I'm of one party, and I know that bipartisan support is going to be necessary to get there, I may have to do some janky stuff to get that bipartisan support. It might need to be covert. I might need to say one thing in public, but in private, we were going to agree on something else. But I have to know that I need to be generous and I need to onboard individuals onto this team that is no longer my team. The big problem that we have in government is everybody's trying to make them the winner as individuals.
Right.
And the reality is we can't win as individuals. And I always say in large organizations, the first person you invite onto your team, you're inviting them into their team. When I invited Peter to have that weekly meeting, I was inviting Peter into our team. And then the first person we invited in, they're being invited into their team. And when you're in government right now, we're just pounding our chest in public, pointing fingers at each other. There's no invitation.
Right.
You know, there's accusation. So teaching the cabinet how to really think differently about onboarding critical relationships for transformational success, I think it's doable. I would need a president that believed in this enough that they would want to get this kind of coaching.
Maybe next time. You know, it's interesting. I read an article, and I'm surprised this theory hasn't gotten more traction. It talked about this shift in like the late 80s, early 90s, where it used to be you become a senator, you become a congressman, you move your whole family to Washington, D.C., and now, because of the demands of fundraising, it's like they fly to D.C. Sunday night to Wednesday, then they fly back home, their family stays home. And so what the article was arguing is that maybe
there's no relationship.
There's no shared community of like our kids go to the same school together, we eat at the same restaurants, and that maybe our whole political dilemma right now is that there's no shared community in DC of the politicians, because like your wives aren't bumping into each other. You're not having cocktails with the other party.
I totally buy into that.
It's easy to hate people when you don't know their story and you've never met their kids.
Going back, when you asked me what was the one big surprise that I had,
full circle.
It was the lack, the power of empathy. The power of empathy. And look, I'm not sure Marjorie Taylor Greene is a particularly desirous of empathy person.
No.
Who knows? Who knows? Who knows? I mean, I've been told by friends of mine who are senators and congressmen, et cetera, that you would be surprised by how some of these pontificating blowhards on both sides actually behave when they're in private.
Right.
They're actually normal, decent people. I don't know about decent, but they're normal people.
Right.
So who knows? But I do believe that a combination of the Never Eat Alone book and Never Lead Alone book could be a transformative factor in our government. But that's why I'm bringing it to new governments.
Yeah.
I'm like, hey, let's make sure we reinvent and let's leapfrog. Let's not go and create systems that are schismatic. But it's interesting. It's happening everywhere, as you know. I mean, every government is going in this direction. And so I'm happy to be working with a few that are trying to be shining stars.
I love it, man. And I think if a politician would adopt that stance and talk about that instead of being a blowhard, they would sweep it, because they would get bipartisan support if they had, instead of just
after they won. Because of our,
I think they could win. I think they could win without being an eviscerating asshole. Because nobody's talking about unity. They're just talking about how the other side sucks.
Well, they're talking about unity.
They want to be unified, but they really don't.
Do you know Andrew Yang?
I know who he is. Yeah,
he's a good buddy of mine, and I love what he's trying to do.
Very smart guy.
He's so smart, and I love what he's trying to do around our political primary system and some of the things that he's trying to re-engineer. There's a lot of folks out there.
I went to one of his events here because a friend of mine got to interview him about crypto and UBI and the future of AI and whatnot. It was a brilliant interview. And I'm just listening to this guy talk, and I'm like, how did this guy not get more traction? Like, he is intelligent. Vivek's intelligent. Tulsi Gabbard's intelligent. Like, there's highly intelligent people on both sides of the political spectrum that speak, like, they're just, it's beautiful when they speak. And we end up with what we end up with. It's just unfortunate.
But again, that's the point. We need to change the system.
Yeah.
And people like him are trying to do that. Can we want to talk about UBI for a second?
Yeah.
You want to hear my little political rant?
I love it. Let's go.
Pittsburgh boy. So I grew up in Pittsburgh, where we were blue-collar Democrats. My old man used to work the polls. He used to get paid by the union to go out on the polls and pass out,
voting cards
and
all that stuff,
to support the Democratic candidates. And you didn't win if you were Republican anywhere in southwestern Pennsylvania. It was all blue-collar, steel Democrats. Okay, so at that point in time, this is just going to be me 5 minutes being an historian, if it's okay.
Go for it.
At that point in time, the steel industry started to crash. And if you open the newspapers, it would have been because the cheap foreign imports flooding our market. And the reality is, as I've learned and studied over time, is that the Japanese, who were those accused cheap foreign imports, they didn't have cheap foreign labor. What happened with the Japanese at the time was that they adopted a set of practices and new work policies that were birthed in the United States by people called Deming and Duran, later by Drucker, but mostly Deming and Duran, called TQM, Total Quality Management, Six Sigma, Continuous Process Improvement, where you awoke and you realize, let's drive decisions down to the front line and let's make continuous improvement a part of our ritual. Kaizen, a new process of work, which is what crushed the steel industry, because the Americans were juggernautic, ossified, just corrosive, arrogant, and they blew it away. And they still had these big mills that had old labor laws, all this bullshit. And we got crushed, right? And I realize now we got crushed because of bad ways of working. That's why I am now deeply committed to effective ways of working. And I do not want American industry. I do not want any industry. I don't want jobs lost, because these large organizations, they employ a lot of people. And I'm a venture capitalist with a firm called Lightspeed. And Lightspeed, you know, and I get to know all of these, and I'm coaching all of these disruptive, young, amazing, crazy, amazing companies. And yet I'm still beholden to these big corporations because I know the families that are employed by these big companies. And I want them to reinvent. Like this company that's several $100 million in market cap, I don't want them crushed and exited, because imagine the impact to American families or families around the world if this company was lost. And so I am desperately focused on new ways of working which can save business. And now, put all that aside. We didn't do it right back then. Back then, steel industry crashed, and now all of a sudden you open up the newspaper and you see Nippon Steel wants to buy U.S. Steel. Look, that ship has already sailed. And what pisses me off to see politicians today, particularly the Dems, who show up in Pittsburgh and say, we're going to make sure that U.S. Steel is owned by U.S. Who the fuck cares at this stage? We've already screwed that up so badly. We've screwed that up so badly with our arrogance and our ineffective work practices. And these guys crushed it on a global basis. Why are we being protectionists? I mean, fine. Yes, I don't want some of my, there's only a few thousands of individuals still work for that company anyway. Right. And in this Pyrrhic victory, I'll tell you what should have happened. The Democrats at that time should have recognized that there were a massively large population in southwestern Pennsylvania that has now been displaced. Everybody celebrates that Pittsburgh has revived. Pittsburgh revived because of CMU and Google and all these folks coming in. The folks that I grew up with, they're still unemployed. The people that I grew up with lost their pensions. The people that I grew up with still live in shanty towns on welfare and on Social Security, which they can't live off of, along the Monongahela in shacks. That's where I grew up, right? And thank God my mom has me to be able to take care of her, or that's exactly where she would be, in absolute poverty. And then what happens is, the last decades, the Democrats didn't do shit for them. Not anything for them. We just kept promising them that we're the better party. And that made sense when the Republicans weren't promising them anything, and the Republicans were the party of the rich. Of course, we had nowhere to vote other than for the Democrats. Well, what's happened now is you've got an evangelical guy in Trump who's coming and making a lot of bombastic promises, and they loved watching him on, The Apprentice.
Right.
They think he's just going to screw with people, which they want to have happen because they just want to. They're upset, understandably.
Yeah, they've been screwed.
No one's taking care of them, understandably. Now, I have no belief at all that Trump's going to help them, at all.
Right.
I don't believe his policies are going to help them. I don't think he gives a shit. But he is just an icon for disruption for them. And that's why we've turned around the political party in Pennsylvania. Now, what should have happened? We should have realized that those people needed to be taken care of. We needed a universal basic income for the people like my father who had lost their jobs at the time. And we should have been proactive in realizing that people who are displaced, we're not going to retrain my dad to be a computer scientist.
Right.
Right? But he might have been able to do, and now I'm going to sound like FDR, which people are going to start accusing me of being a socialist, but we might have been able to put them on JobWorks. There's other examples of that today, like foster care. So I have foster children. I have 6 kids. Not all foster care. 2 of them were foster care, the rest other forms of adoption. And my foster boys, I believe that gays are put on the planet to take care of the ones the straights don't. So,
By the way, my favorite take on this is Dennis Miller when they were arguing about gay marriage, gay adoption, whatever. And he's like, hey, if you're not fostering 4 kids, shut the fuck up. You don't get to have an opinion. And Dennis Miller is the best. I love that guy. Hardcore libertarian as well. Yeah. Anyway, I digress.
So, but what's interesting, you take these kids who've been abused as children, taken out of their families. They don't know how to trust. They don't know how to effectively work in community. So I've taken this book and these principles, and I've built them into systems to teach kids in foster care how to interrelate again. And I brought that back to other, we did that out in California, and I brought it to Hickenlooper, who was the governor of Colorado at the time and now senator. He's an amazing guy. He ran for president. I was supporting him at the time. But Hickenlooper has helped us bring it to Colorado. But it's around these interdependent principles of co-elevation and that we need to teach these kids. But what's interesting about the kids in foster care is they're entitled, because these kids have nothing, but they don't have to give anything to get anything. And they've never been taught to be, like when I was a kid, I had this fear that if I didn't perform, my parents would kick me in the butt, literally, right? Back in those days.
Yeah.
And I was fearful of losing something, losing my family unit, losing something. These kids don't have any fear. We've done nothing. We've created an entitled state for these kids, and we haven't taught them how to interrelate. We haven't given them work ethic. We haven't given them anything. So I think that, look, a combination of universal basic income, but also giving people the capacity for the pride of work. We need this. In the next 10 years, we have the chance of some of the most audacious disruption and displacement that could ever possibly occur. You take a look at the largest jobs that exist: call centers, truck drivers, Uber drivers. We're not going to need them in 10 years. We probably won't need them in 5. If you show up in San Francisco, you will see every 5 cars a Waymo, which, or a Zoox or whatever, self-driving cars. It was funny because my partner and I just got engaged, by the way.
Congratulations.
Yeah, I know. I'm so happy. Happiest I've ever been in my life. I can talk about that for a while. And it was only because of plant medicine. But that's a whole different issue.
Yeah, that's a whole nother podcast.
It's a whole nother podcast. We can have that conversation. 21 ayahuasca sits. But the transformation of jobs and the displacement that's about to occur, we're going to have massive social unrest. We're going to have what we have in Pittsburgh, southwestern Pennsylvania. We're going to explode that by 1,000, by 1 million. And what I'm hearing in our political conversations is a bunch of bullshit of protectionism against Nippon Steel and U.S. Steel. Fuck. No, that has nothing to do with what we need to do right now. There's 2 things that need to happen right now. Enterprises need to radically re-engineer their work, like the American steel industry did not do, and governments need to lean in and co-create and understand what that means to displacement. And like we didn't do back in the steel industry, that pocket of what happened in Pittsburgh and is exactly where the world is going. And we are not doing what we need to do to manage that disruption and that displacement. That's why guys like Andrew Yang to me are important.
Is there any example of an industry that's getting out ahead of this? Like, can you point to a company or an industry that's like, yeah, the buggy whip makers, they have figured out where they need to transition. They've got a corporate plan.
It won't be favorable to the employee in this regard, but Uber certainly is.
Yeah.
I mean, they're doing deals, and they realize that they're not going to have Uber drivers at some point in the future. So that's one. But they're not necessarily taking upon themselves to manage the displacement of the worker.
Right. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
That's government's job.
Got it.
I mean, one could argue that it's the billionaires' jobs, maybe, but it's most of the billionaires that I know, and I know a lot of them. I was at a dinner party the other night. This is me pinching myself. I literally was at a dinner party the other night, and there were more than 15 billionaires at a dinner party of less than 20-some.
Yeah, we don't want that bus to crash. That's
right?
like a third of the
there's some people out there that do.
Yeah. Like 1/100th of the national GDP disappeared today in a bus accident.
I was literally. My fiance is a brilliant analyst, and he was doing some quick back of the envelope figures and how many hundreds of millions of dollars were represented at that dinner table. How billions of dollars were represented. Hundreds of billions of dollars of net worth was represented at that table.
That's wild. Hey, man, I know your time is really valuable. I like to always end on 2 questions. I think I'm going to know the answer to one of them. I'll be excited to hear the other one. Obviously, this is coming out in November, right, as this book is launching. What are you most looking forward to? End of the year, beginning of 2025? Like, are you going on the podcast speaking circuit to get, awareness around this book? Or like, what is Keith most excited about going into the end of the year? And then I am a movie junkie. That is my release from society. That's my version of ayahuasca. I just zone out and watch movies. So I want to know your favorite movie and why.
Okay. Of all the stuff I'm going over to Bhutan and to do some work in a bed. There's a lot of cool stuff. But the most exciting thing I have is I've got 4 of my 6 boys coming for Christmas this year. So I'm really excited about that in LA. 2 of my boys, for a number of reasons, are estranged from the family, mostly jail and personal choice. But the 4 boys, we're all going to be together. So I'm very happy about that.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And then on movies, oh gosh. You know what? It's a movie and a book. Do you know The Great Gatsby?
Yeah.
So...
which version of the movie, though?
You know, the DiCaprio one was pretty good.
It's pretty good.
Right? Even though, you know, the old one. But still, I would... The power of that movie, for me, my company was called Ferrazzi Greenlight. And the very end of The Great Gatsby, there's a passage. Gatsby believed in that green light, the orgiastic future that year by year recedes before him. It was a green light at the end of the love of his life's dock in the Long Island Sound, and he was in love with this woman, and he could never have her, but he never felt that he could be a part of the society that she was born into, and he did everything he could do, and at the end it killed him literally. Everything he could do to live up to the aspirations that he had of what he needed to be, and that. The reason I called my firm Ferrazzi Greenlight is that has always been my cautionary reminder, because it was so easy for me to be a kid, embarrassed of being poor, embarrassed of being gay, feeling like I had to be bigger and more, you know, and more than I actually was, and the shame, all of that, and it would have been a destructive force in my life, and so I've always been very cautionary to keep my humility, to keep my feet grounded, and keep my spirituality, both my religious spirituality, but also my non-religious spirituality. It's why I'm a seeker. So this is the tee up for when you had me back talking about ayahuasca.
Perfect. Hey, man, I really appreciate you being on. I have to find a way to stay in touch because you're just a fascinating guy, and thanks for your time, man.
Cheers. Cheers.